welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got a story that'll make you think twice about who you hire to tend your garden. It's a tale of creeping unease, simmering resentment, and a chilling smile that hides a dark intent. Imagine your home, your sanctuary, a place of beauty and peace. Now, imagine that peace slowly being eroded, tainted by the very person you trusted to maintain it. This isn't your typical, scary monster story. This is a story about the insidious nature of envy, the way it can fester and corrupt, turning something beautiful into something terrifying. We'll delve into the tale of a seemingly ordinary gardener named Ben, and how his presence slowly transforms a tranquil paradise into a living nightmare. From subtle acts of sabotage to a full-blown invasion of privacy, you'll witness the gradual unraveling of a perfect life, all triggered by a single, unsettling smile. Get ready to question who you let into your space, because sometimes, the most dangerous threats hide in plain sight, disguised as the ordinary. So, settle in, turn down the lights, and prepare to be chilled by the gardener's chilling smile. The house, my house, was my sanctuary. A sprawling, three-story Victorian, perched atop a gentle rise overlooking the town. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows in the morning, painting rainbows across the polished oak floors. The gardens were my pride and joy. Lush rose bushes climbed trellises, vibrant hydrangeas exploded in color, and the meticulously manicured lawn stretched like a velvet carpet to the edge of the property. It was, to put it simply, beautiful. To maintain this beauty, I employed a gardener, a man named Ben. He was a local, recommended by a neighbor who'd used him for years. At first glance, Ben seemed adequate. Quiet, efficient, he arrived early each morning, the rumble of his mower the first sound to break the morning stillness. He was a man of few words, a shadow moving through my meticulously planned flower beds. Perhaps too quiet. There was something about Ben that always sat a little uneasy with me. He kept his gaze lowered, his face perpetually hidden under the brim of a worn-out baseball cap. He never made eye contact, never offered a greeting beyond a mumbled grunt if I happened to cross his path in the garden. It wasn't rudeness exactly, more like avoidance. Like he was trying to be as invisible as possible, a ghost in my meticulously curated landscape. I remember the first time I noticed a flicker of something darker in him. I had complimented his work on the rose bushes, genuinely impressed by how expertly he had pruned them. "They look fantastic, Ben," I'd said, smiling. He stopped clipping, his shoulders stiffening. For a fleeting moment, his eyes, usually cast downwards, flickered up to mine. They were dark, almost black, and held a spark of something cold, something resentful. He simply nodded curtly and went back to his work, the snip of the shears suddenly sounding sharp and aggressive in the otherwise peaceful air. It was easy to dismiss it as shyness, or perhaps just a gruff personality. But as the weeks turned into months, subtle incidents began to accumulate, little prickles of unease that I couldn't quite shake off. Flowers seemingly inexplicably uprooted, delicate branches on my Japanese maple snapped. At first, I attributed it to clumsy accidents, the hazards of gardening itself. But then, I started noticing a pattern. It was always the most prized plants, the ones I'd spent years nurturing, that seemed to suffer. The prize-winning orchids in the greenhouse, for example, started appearing with inexplicably crushed petals. The rare blue poppies I'd painstakingly cultivated, one morning I found them all brutally decapitated. I started to watch Ben more closely. From my study window, overlooking the back garden, I'd observe him as he worked. He moved methodically, but there was a certain tension in his movements, a rigidness that hinted at suppressed anger. Sometimes, when he thought he was alone, I'd see his jaw clench, his hands tightening around the handle of his tools with a force that seemed excessive. It was like he was fighting an internal battle, holding back something volatile. Then came the incident with the fountain. A beautiful, antique marble fountain stood at the center of my rose garden, a centerpiece I'd inherited from my grandmother. One morning, I went out to find it defiled. Someone had poured dirt and grass clippings into the pristine water, clogging the pump and turning the clear water murky brown. Rage, hot and immediate, flared within me. Who would do something like this? It was senseless, malicious. I confronted Ben. Did you see anything happen to the fountain? I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though I felt my fists clenching at my sides. He didn't look at me. He was weeding a flower bed, his movements slow, deliberate. Fountain, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Yes, the fountain. It's been messed with. He shrugged, still not meeting my gaze. Maybe kids, he suggested, his tone flat, dismissive. Kids? Ben, this is a gated property. No kids come onto my land. He finally looked up, his dark eyes cold and hard. Could be animals, he said, his voice laced with a hint of sarcasm. I stared at him, a cold dread creeping into my stomach. It wasn't animals, and it wasn't kids. It was intentional. And the way Ben was acting, the lack of concern, the almost veiled defiance in his eyes, it was chilling. I dismissed him for the day, telling him I'd deal with the fountain myself. As he gathered his tools, I saw his lips curl into a thin, almost imperceptible smile. It sent a shiver down my spine. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Ben's face, that fleeting smile, kept replaying in my mind. I started thinking about his quietness, his resentment, the subtle acts of sabotage in the garden. It all pointed in one direction. Envy. He was envious. Envious of my house, my gardens, my life, my wealth. It hit me then, with sickening clarity, that the fountain incident wasn't just mindless vandalism. It was a deliberate act of spite, a way to defile something beautiful, something I cherished. And it was directed at me. The next few days were tense. Ben continued to work, but the atmosphere had shifted. There was a palpable hostility in the air, a silent war being waged in my own garden. I started locking the garden shed at night, a small, futile act of defense against a threat I didn't fully understand. I considered firing him, but something held me back. Perhaps it was foolish pride, a refusal to be intimidated. Or maybe it was a morbid curiosity to see how far he would go. Then came the break-in. I was away for a weekend, visiting my sister in the city. When I returned on Sunday evening, the house felt different. Colder, somehow. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed the door to my study was slightly ajar. I distinctly remember closing it before I left. My heart started to pound. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed the door open. Everything seemed in place at first glance. But then I saw it. My antique jewelry box, usually kept on my desk, was gone. Panic seized me. That box contained pieces passed down through generations, irreplaceable family heirlooms, vintage brooches, necklaces, rings, things of immense sentimental and monetary value. My mind immediately went to Ben. He knew I was away for the weekend. He had access to the property. And the envy, the simmering resentment I'd sensed in him, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I called the police, of course. They took a report, dusted for fingerprints, but the officer's face was grim. Hard to trace vintage jewelry, sir, he said, his tone apologetic. Likely pawned already, gone into the system. Days turned into weeks, and the jewelry was never recovered. The police investigation stalled. Ben, of course, denied everything. He played the innocent, claiming he was just a gardener, knew nothing about any break-in. Without concrete proof, the police couldn't do anything. But I knew. I knew it was him. And the worst part was, he knew I knew. He continued to come to work, his face impassive, his silence more menacing than any accusation. He walked through my garden like he owned it, like he had a right to be there, a silent victor in some twisted game. One afternoon, I found him standing by the rose bushes, the very ones I'd complimented him on months ago. He was staring at them, his face unreadable. I walked towards him, anger finally bubbling to the surface. "You took them, didn't you, Ben?" I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You stole my jewelry." He slowly turned to face me. For the first time, he met my eyes directly. There was no more pretense of shyness, no more downcast gaze. His eyes were cold, devoid of any humanity. And then, he smiled. Not a thin, fleeting smile this time, but a wide, chilling grin that stretched his lips thin and revealed his yellowed teeth. "Maybe I did," he said, his voice low, gravelly. "Maybe I just wanted a little piece of what you have. A little piece of your pretty life." Then, he did something that made my blood run cold. He reached out and, with a sharp, deliberate motion, snapped off the head of a perfect, blooming red rose. He held it up, its crimson petals dripping, and crushed it slowly in his fist, petal by petal, until only a mangled stem remained. "There's more where that came from," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Enjoy your beautiful garden, ma'am. While it lasts." I fired him that day, of course. I told him to get off my property and never come back. He just shrugged, gathered his tools, and walked away, that chilling smile lingering on his face. But he hadn't really gone. Not entirely. He was still there, in the shadows of my garden, in the rustling leaves of the trees, in the unsettling silence that had replaced the peaceful sounds of nature. He had poisoned my sanctuary, tainted my beautiful house with his envy and his malice. And every time I looked out at my once perfect garden, now scarred by his presence, I felt a cold dread creep into my heart. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that Ben was not truly done with me. He had taken my jewelry, yes, but he had stolen something far more valuable. He had stolen my peace. And I feared, with every fiber of my being, that he would be back to take even more. My beautiful house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, haunted by the shadow of the gardener and his chilling, envious smile. And so, the story of Ben, the gardener, leaves us with a lingering sense of unease. It's a reminder that sometimes, the most terrifying threats aren't supernatural monsters or creatures lurking in the dark, but the quiet, insidious presence of human malice. What struck me most about this tale is the gradual erosion of peace. It wasn't a sudden, violent intrusion, but a slow, creeping infection of envy that poisoned everything beautiful. It highlights how vulnerable we can be, even within the supposed safety of our own homes. We build these sanctuaries, these places of beauty and tranquility, only to have them violated by someone we thought we could trust. This story also forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality of hidden resentments. We often overlook subtle cues, those little prickles of unease, dismissing them as mere quirks of personality. But sometimes, those subtle cues are warnings, a glimpse into a darker, more dangerous mind. The gardener's chilling smile serves as a cautionary tale. It's a reminder to be vigilant, to trust our instincts, and to recognize that sometimes, the most dangerous threats wear the mask of normalcy. It prompts us to reflect on the importance of protecting our peace, not just from external forces, but from the insidious poison of human envy. So, the next time you look out at your garden, or at your home, remember this story. Remember the chilling smile, and the insidious way that envy can corrupt even the most beautiful of places. And perhaps, take a moment to consider who you let into your space, and what they might truly be seeing. Thank you for listening, and until next time, sleep well, if you can. Hey, horror fans. If you enjoyed our chilling tale and want to keep the spine-tingling stories coming, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support keeps the darkness alive. Share this video with your friends, let's spread the fear together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss a hair-raising moment. Join our community of thrill seekers and prepare for more eerie adventures. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay scared.